Hello and welcome to That Shooting Show. My name's Steve Anderson. I am your humble host. Want to thank our partners first. You know them, you love them. Say them with me in your car, in your bucket truck, in your SUV. Walther Firearms is the proud title sponsor of this program. And want me to remind you yet again that all of the Walther Firearms do come with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if there's something wrong with you, and that isn't the best gun for you, hey, no problem. 30-day money-back guarantee. I'm not aware of anybody else in the business that does that. Certainly not in the firearms world. You just don't see it. So check it out. And also, Targets USA manufactures the finest steel targetry on the planet. The AMG-lab.com Commanderson timer continues to turn heads and blow minds. I know there's a lead time, and I don't know what it is. All I can tell you is when you finally get it, it will be the best timer you've ever used. That's all I can tell you. Hunter's HD Gold, as you know, is the only eyewear that I wear. OutdoorDynamics.net remanufactures the finest competition ammunition you can dispense from a Freedom Seed dispenser. We got out of order there. CR Speed. CR Speed, finest gun handling gadgetry on the planet. And shootingsportsinnovations.com is a lot to type because there's a lot to see when you get there. I want to remind you to go check out upcoming classes to see where we're going to be and what we're going to be doing. And if you want a class in your area, you can get the class for free. Very simple. We have some availability in the fall and in the winter. If you are in an area that's suitable for that, I just talked to a guy today about a potential for something in the Chicago area. So if you want to see something in the Chicago area, let me know. All you got to do is send an email to steve@andersonshooting.com, and in the subject line put, "I want to do a class." Simple as that. And we'll get you on the phone. We'll talk about it. We'll figure it out. And you can get the class for free. And we'll tell you all about that when you send the email. Just tell me you want a class, steve@andersonshooting.com. But until then, go check out upcoming classes. Okay? All right. So today we are going to talk about a training plan. And one of the things that's interesting about doing these classes is we work on stuff for 2 days, and then sometimes at the end of it somebody comes to me and says, okay, now what do I do? Well, what you do is what we've been doing. And my classes are more about how to practice than they are anything else. So if you're not sure how to practice, that's literally what we show you how to do. Yes, there are some party tricks. Of course, there are some big gains. Of course, there are new skills. But the background operating system for all of this is what I want you to be practicing after you leave. Okay? So we're going to give you a little overview today on how to create a training plan. Because if you don't have a training plan, you might just be plinking. Right? You might just be going out screwing around. So let's not do that. Let's be a little bit more specific. So the first thing we need to know, do you need to get faster? Do you need to get more accurate? Or do you need to become a better competitor? And you're probably saying yes to all three. Yes, yes, and yes. Well, that may be true, but we got to pick one to start with. Okay, it's very simple. Everybody is on a spectrum of trending towards slow and accurate or trending towards fast and sloppy. Okay, me, for example, if I were to resume competition, I would be trending towards slow and accurate. I'm not slow by any means, but if I go out and resume competition, I'm going to be a little bit off the pace of the top guys. So I need to get faster. I don't have an accuracy problem. Okay. Now, if we need to get more accurate, that puts us in the fast and sloppy category. And again, it's broad. I'm not saying you're 100% one or the other. I'm saying everybody falls on that spectrum somewhere. Okay. That's an easier nut to crack. If you're fast and sloppy, you need to come to my class immediately. Fast and sloppy is my specialty. I can work wonders with a shooter who's fast and sloppy, and I can help slow and accurate too. It's just fast and sloppy is an easier nut to crack. And it's also possible that you need to become a better competitor. And you will know that if you're consistently shooting below your known skill level. If you're shooting better in practice than you are in competition, then you need to become a better competitor. That's your first priority. And that's why I have a little bit of an issue with people trying to use local matches as practice, because you're never going to do enough of any kind of shooting to have it qualify as practice. But you can practice becoming a better competitor all day long. And whichever one of these applies to you will determine the majority of your training plan. But you got to be honest about what you need to train in order to reach your goal. You either need to get faster, you need to get more accurate, or you need to become a better competitor. Pick one first. I don't really like this terminology, but we'll use it anyway because it saves time. How are you getting beat? Everybody listening to this program, if you're getting beat within your class, it's either speed or it's points. And if you know which one it is, we know how to fix it. And if you're getting beat by speed and points, you might be using the wrong measuring stick, right? If you're in B class, you compare yourself to a grandmaster, you may be getting beat on speed and points. So we got to pick one first. Okay? Now, what I don't think people understand about training, the sole purpose of training is to have a desired or higher level of skill available without conscious thought. Did you know that about training? Meaning, did you know that the purpose of training is to have a higher level of skill available without conscious thought? If you don't know that, or if you don't understand it, you're going to make training mistakes. Now, this can only happen with repetition of the skill at the desired level. For example, if you want a sub-second draw, the only way that's going to happen is to train getting the gun out of the holster and aimed at the target in under a second. It's the only way that's ever going to happen. Now, with that example, the first time you do that, you're going to miss your grip. You're going to make mistakes. That's okay. One of the biggest mistakes people make is, we'll just stay with that example. I want a 1 second first shot. Well, what they really do is they say, I want a sub-second alpha. Well, if you can't get the gun out of the holster and fired safely in under a second, you're not going to get an alpha the first time that happens. You're just not. And let's say you do a 98 and it's a micro or a delta. Is that good or bad? Well, I think that's great, because you just learned what it feels like to fire a safe shot out of the holster in under a second. And when you're working on new stuff or breaking new ground, a low number of perfect reps is not really training. A high number of acceptable reps, now that's training. That's making progress. That's good stuff. But if you're insisting on perfect reps, you're not creating subconscious skill. You're creating conscious-minded perfection. That's why the number is so low, because conscious-minded perfection is very difficult to do. But acceptable subconscious performance, that's pretty easy to do. Much, much easier. Now, the conscious mind will be used to make changes and conduct experiments during this process. Again, we have to use words I don't really like to use because it saves time. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to miss your grip. You're going to hit the beaver tail. There's going to be little things that happen because you're evaluating a technique. Right? You're pulling that technique out of the subconscious and bringing it into the conscious mind. This is required. Conscious mind is great at evaluating options and making decisions, just not while you're competing. So training is when you're going to use your conscious mind to evaluate what you're doing and how you could do it better. So, number one, dry fire can be used for everything except splits and true shot calling. Everything. Everything the sport requires can be practiced in dry fire except the time between shots on the same target. Now, I know that's what all y'all are really interested in, isn't it? Yeah, I don't know why you keep coming back. No, I actually do. It's very easy to call your shots in dry fire. Where were the sights when the hammer fell? Not necessarily when you press the trigger, but when the hammer or striker fell, where were the sights? That's shot calling in dry fire. That's very easy to do. And dry fire can be used for everything except splits and live fire shot calling. Okay? And live fire must have a definition of success that can be met during that particular training session. Goal-based practice completely changed my attitude towards training and was so powerful to my self-image, because if I go down to the range to shoot and I don't know what success is, I'm not going to be successful. So I'm not going to feel successful. So my confidence may be damaged, almost certainly will be damaged. But if I go down with a definition of success and I meet that definition, I feel successful. That's my confidence going up. Confidence is at least 30% of performance. So if you need to get faster, everything but splits, which is, by the way, I'll tell you again, splits is the last place to go looking for time. Hear me now, hear me later, believe me now, believe me later. Splits is the last place you want to go looking for time, because it's the greatest risk for the least reward. But everything else, you can use speed mode training, which simply means establishing and reducing a par time for anything that needs to be quicker. How do I train movement in dry fire? Well, set up a movement thing, figure out what the par time is, and go to work on it. It's real simple. It's all I've ever done in dry fire. Obviously, the basic handling, that's covered in refinement repetition. Periods of movement, we just discussed. That's easy to do in dry fire. Transitions, easy to do in dry fire. You want to be careful with transitions, because the whole idea of practicing transitions is getting your head and or eyes ahead of the sight, and then bringing the sight to where the head or to where the eyes are looking, as opposed to following the sight back and forth. Following the sight back and forth is slower and it's less precise. Very likely to induce overswinging, because that's what people are afraid of. Oh, I overswung the gun. Well, you did that because you were focused on the sight and you kind of saw a target appear in the background and you fired the shot. Or you had to go back. But what you're doing here for anything in speed mode is to raise your limit of function for non-shooting skills. And during this process, accuracy is not hugely important if you have the ability to make the shot. So if you're going to be training movement in dry fire, you're going to have some kind of shot, a period of movement, some kind of shot. How long did that take? Figure out what the par time is. And then go to work on that par time, 1/10 of a second at a time. And you're learning what it feels like to operate at a higher speed. Now, so let's say you're going to fire a shot, move 6 feet and fire a shot, and that takes you 4 seconds. Well, that feels pretty normal. Then you're going to learn to do it in 3 seconds. What does that feel like? That feels different. Well, you do that 20 or 30 times, and the new 3-second feeling is normal, then you can go back to looking for accuracy, because the movement skill is subconscious. So now you can pay more attention to the sights. Okay? And if we're talking about non-moving and shooting, the Can You Count classifier is the fastest shooting in the sport that I'm aware of. And if you're not in USPSA, just look up USPSA Can You Count. Just Google that, and you'll see. It's 5 reload 5 on very close targets. And it's the fastest shooting in the sport. And then the other classifier that's really good for non-shooting movement is classifier 9910, which is called ×2. And I'm not telling you to practice classifiers. I'm telling you to use these classifiers with the data available to find out the level of your non-shooting movement. It's really, really great. It's 6 shots, it's a 16-foot sprint, and it's 6 more shots. It's wonderful. And if you're interested in foot speed, it's the most amount of non-shooting movement that I'm aware of in a classifier. If there's another one, I'm not aware of it. I can't think of it right now. Okay, so Can You Count for the fastest shooting standing still? 9910 ×2 for non-shooting movement. Okay, again, I'm not telling you to practice classifiers. I'm telling you to use those classifiers to evaluate those skills. Go out and practice, shoot it for score, figure out what your classification is, go to work on it. And I think this comes up later in my outline, but dry firing in between live fire runs is extremely powerful in training. I probably shoot less rounds in training than I ever have, even though I spend more time training, because if let's say I'm trying to do an LPRES in 4 seconds. It does me no good to shoot bullets until my body can complete those activities in less than 4 seconds. Why am I shooting bullets? Right? And if I'm at 450 or 470 with bad hits, I'm not making any progress. But if I get under 4 and I can do that 20 times in a row in dry fire, now I can load the gun and see what happens. And those of you that have been to class know that we do this all the time. Hey, let's dry fire a little bit. What does it feel like to do this thing in whatever time you want to do it in? And it's really important that you set a goal you can achieve today. Don't go down in one session and try to get 3 seconds off your LPRES. Make it a realistic goal that you can accomplish today so that you can feel successful. Right? Confidence is past success predicting future success. That's what confidence is. I've been successful in the past, therefore I expect to be successful in the future. Okay? And leaving the range feeling unsuccessful for any reason can only damage your confidence. Leaving the range feeling successful can only raise your confidence. Okay? So to get faster, primarily in dry fire, set up anything you want to, pick a part-time, or establish a part-time, and then start chipping away at it. You'll figure out pretty quickly what needs to happen. And in that environment, you want to be real strategic. What I mean by that is, let's say you're trying to get a faster reload. Well, you could just throw speed at it, but that will cause more mistakes. If instead you take all the events that are in that reload, let's just look at them real quick. So we've got firing the shot, getting the hand off the gun, hitting the button, getting the hand to the mag, getting the mag to the gun, getting the mag in the gun, reestablishing grip, and firing the shot. That's like 8 things that are happening in a reload. Well, we left out seeing the mag well. So 9. Which of those 9 things could you do sooner? And establishing sooner as an objective instead of faster will cause less mistakes and less tension, and will virtually eliminate trigger freeze, by the way. So let's say you need to get more accurate. You need to improve your points. So what we have to know about accuracy is it can only be sight or trigger that is causing an accuracy problem. Now, somebody is saying, what about grip? Well, what about grip? Grip only to the extent that it's causing a sight or a trigger issue. You can fire an accurate shot with a poor grip. I'm not saying that's the goal, but it can be done. Right? If you had a bad grip and it produced a bad shot, it either impacted the trigger pull or the sight picture. Most likely the trigger pull. And maybe the sight picture in the case of grip. But my Brazilian tour was based on, hey guys, in Portuguese, English, Chinese, whatever language you like, the bullets go where the sights are when the gun fires. The bullet, yeah. And if you know that, you know where the bullet went. If you don't know that, you don't know where the bullet went. See why I'm saying grip can only produce a bad shot because of an effect on sight or trigger? Yeah, that's what I'm kind of saying. Now, if you know whether it's sight or trigger, you know what to work on. And what's interesting here is for newer shooters, it's more likely to be trigger, because newer shooters have figured out pretty quickly that they need a good sight picture. The problem with newer shooters is they're typically hitting the trigger too hard. And yes, grip can impact that. The firmer our support hand grip is, the more trigger slop we can get away with. But the newer shooters, it tends to be trigger. Ironically, the more experienced shooters, the better shooters, it tends to be sight. Something happens to better shooters where they forget that they need a good sight picture to produce a good shot, or they think they can get two shots on one sight picture. Okay, but if you know whether it's sight or trigger, you know what to fix. And getting more accurate from a technical perspective, it's extremely good to shoot groups. When we get to the group shooting portion of class, it's one of my, well, they're all my favorite part. But frequently, I can sense that somebody is thinking, okay, group shooting, I get it. What does this have to do with IPSC? What does this have to do with Steel Challenge? What does this have to do with IDPA? You're learning to fire really accurate shots. You're learning to fire the gun without disturbing the sight picture. That's what's great about group shooting. And I know that over time, group shooting produces subconscious trigger control. That means when the shot is more difficult, our subconscious mind knows that trigger is more important than sight as long as sight is acceptable. And if you don't believe me, come to class. It's pretty cool. If we're talking about accuracy at speed, which is a word I hear every now and then, the only thing that produces accuracy at speed is learning to call your shots. And learning to call your shots is the most important skill that you can possibly have in the world of practical shooting. It frees you from looking at the targets. It tells you how fast to shoot. It ensures that you leave only acceptable shots. These are all good things. So if you don't know how to call your shots, or if you've struggled with it, get your butt to one of my classes ASAP. We spend 3 hours on day one, probably, at least 2, maybe 3, depending on what time we get to it, on shot calling. Because here's the deal. If you know how to call your shots, and you use live fire mostly for shot calling, it opens up a world of dry fire that will blow your mind. Now, we need to talk about cadence. I understand cadence as predicting or desiring the shots to sound a certain way. So if there's three targets, maybe I want to hear pop 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 pop. Those will probably not be very good shots. Or I may want to hear pop 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 pop. That's fine to want that. The sight may or may not support that. And I'm not sure who out there is telling people to work on their cadence, and I'm not really sure what they're trying to accomplish. Now, one idea that I support in cadence is speeding up transitions so that the time between targets is lower. That's where cadence can be useful in training to speed up the transitions. And we need to be really careful with predictive shooting. As I understand predictive shooting, what it means is, because I know what my sights are going to do for this target at this distance, I can predict it instead of waiting for it. That's what I think it means. At least that's what it means to me. And up close and personal, sure, not a problem. The problem with predictive shooting is people think that it works all the time. Now, if you want predictive shooting to work at greater distances, you're going to have to live fire a lot. You're just going to have to. So think about this. Let's say you were to shoot 1,000 rounds for 30 days at every distance in the sport. Okay, 1,000 rounds for 30 days. And you got out to 25 yards. And you did that every day from 3 feet to 25 yards. You would know at the end of that 30 days exactly what good shots look like. You get to 25-yard target, you would know exactly what your sights are going to do the vast majority of the time. So be very careful with predictive shooting unless you're going to shoot a lot of live ammo. Okay? Now, when we're trying to get more accurate, the time is not super important. And this is another area where you really need to know yourself as a shooter. Okay? If you're having trouble, let's call them splits or follow-up shots. If you're having trouble with follow-up shots, the last thing you need to be measuring is your splits, because you're not firing accurate shots. So it doesn't really matter how fast you're doing it if you're trying to get more accurate. Okay? But what you're learning is you're learning to see what you need to see to shoot accurate shots as quickly as you can see them. That's what you're learning to do. And in the world of classifiers, the 6 and 6 challenge, I think it's 0901. From just going from memory here, I don't have it in front of me. I think it's 0901. 6 and 6 challenge is the absolute best way to train the hardest shots in the sport with a time limit. And when you read that classifier, you've got 6 seconds at 25 yards, freestyle. But because it's a fixed time classifier, it's non-penalty mics. So you're not penalized for the shots you don't take, right? So, and I'm not a math whiz, but and by the way, at the 25-yard line, it does allow a reload and 6 more shots. But you only have 6 seconds. And open, limited GM, right? Let's say I shoot 6 alphas, do a reload, and shoot 2 more alphas. That's great. That's 8 alphas, that's 40 points. It's very good. But if I shoot 12 deltas, that's 12 points. Well, in limited, it would be 24 points. In minor, it'd be 12 points. So if you're leaving 12 points out there, you'd be way better off not doing the reload and shooting alphas. Right? If you could shoot 6 alphas in 30 seconds, that's 30 points. 6 times 5, 30 points. But if you shoot 6 deltas, it's only 6 points. Remember, you only got 6 seconds. The point I'm trying to make is, at the 25-yard line, don't attempt the reload until you're shooting alphas with time to spare, because you don't need it for a masterclass score. I believe at this point, every division except maybe Revolver needs a couple of shots after the reload to get a GM run. I don't have it in front of me, so I don't know for sure. But I would doubt that Revolver is going to get 6 reloads, 6 done in 6 seconds. I'm just not sure if that's possible. Well, I'm sure it's possible, but I don't know what those hits look like. Okay. Now, if you need to become a better competitor, and the way you know this is if you're making a lot of mental mistakes as opposed to technical mistakes, then the mental management program is absolutely what you need to do as soon as possible. Mental management cranks out better competitors over and over and over again. And if you're consistently shooting below your skill level, more training is probably not going to help, because the problem isn't skill. The problem is getting access to the skill. And that's what mental management shows you how to do, is to get access to the skill that you have. Mental management can't make you shoot better than you can shoot, but that's not what most people want. If they're being honest, most people really just want consistency. Man, I had a good stage, I had a bad stage. I had a good day, I had a bad day. What do I got to do to get these all strung together? Well, what you got to do is learn how to shoot consistently. And you shoot consistently by having a better process that you employ with greater consistency. And we talk about this all the time, negative imprints during training is the absolute best way to shoot below your skill level, if that's what you're trying to do, which means that positive imprints is the best way to get your skill level in competition. There's no other way to do it, right? If I go out and practice strong hand, weak hand shooting, and I remind myself that I'm terrible at it, what's my attitude going to be when I get to my stage? Oh, I'm terrible at this. Well, guess what? But if I go out and practice strong hand, weak hand shooting, and I imprint, hey, this is working, I'm getting better at this, then I have a much greater chance of good performance, because I'm expecting a skill that's improved instead of expecting a skill that's no good. And those of you that are really tough on yourselves with your self-talk, don't ever talk to yourself harsher than you would a shooter you're trying to help. I know you think you can take it. I know you think those rules don't apply to you, but I'm telling you what, if beating yourself up is good for you, then it's good for a shooter you're trying to help. And if beating up a shooter who you're trying to help is not good for them, then it can't be good for you. So here's what we got to think about with our training. We got to think about the requirements of the sport. And here we'll be talking about USPSA IPSC. Steel Challenge has a much simpler requirement. Hey, stand here and shoot these targets. Pretty simple. And I know there's a movement stage, but my point is Steel Challenge has a much shorter list of requirements than USPSA or IDPA or IPSC. Here's what you need to be able to do. Create and execute a subconscious stage plan that minimizes the time spent not shooting. That's it. And that is the only stage planning principle that I think is true 100% of the time. If we take the things we think about stage planning, rush the port, don't rush the port, stay moving, don't stay moving, post up, stay moving, shuffle step, non-shuffle step, baby steps, Filipino kick out, those principles kind of come and go as the right thing to do. But minimizing the time spent not shooting is the only principle of stage planning that I think never changes. If there's another one that doesn't change, I'm not aware of it, or I can't think of it right now. Okay? So, leaving acceptable shots as quickly as you can see them, let's say from 3 feet to 30 yards. 1 meter to 30 meters, if you like meters. Can you leave acceptable shots as quickly as you can see them anywhere from 3 feet to 30 yards? I know there's longer shots out there. I know one of the hardest stages I ever saw was a Georgia State match where they had a plate rack at 50 yards and open shooters were doing standing reloads. 50 yards is not very common in the matches that I go to, in the matches that I hear about. But let's say 1 yard to 30 yards. Can you leave acceptable shots on anything from 1 yard to 30 yards? That'd be more of an accuracy thing. You need to learn how to move without shooting in all directions. And what really blows people's mind about movement is when we take the focus off of the body for a short period of time and we look at it a little differently. What if you saw movement as transporting the sight picture to a new location? My gun was here to fire a shot. It needs to be over here to fire the next shot. So I'm going to transport my sight picture to a new location. Thinking about it like that might change the way you see movement. If we're talking about ports, you got 2 ports. My job is to move my sight picture from port A to port B as efficiently as possible. And a straight line is usually the most efficient way to do that. What do I need to do to move the gun from here to here? It's pretty cool. And shooting while moving in all directions is also something you need to be able to do. Somebody always this comes up in every class. When should I post up and when should I shoot while moving? And I can't answer that question universally. What I can tell you is that anytime somebody's capable of making the shots, shooting while moving is usually faster. Sometimes people rig the game and they'll shoot really good, posting up because they want that to be better. Again, I can't tell you when you should post up and when you should shoot while moving, but I can tell you that if you can make the shot, now you've got options. Now you can decide whether to shoot while moving or post up. And I don't know if this is obvious or not, but the only reason we shoot while moving is to reduce the amount of time spent not shooting. It's the only reason. And when you're practicing shooting while moving, I got a couple of tips for you. Number 1, to shoot well while moving, you need to do it long enough to forget that you're moving. When you forget that you're moving, we're back to sight and trigger. But if we're thinking about our feet, we're not going to shoot very well. And that's part of the process. And people always ask me, should I shoot when the foot's up? Should I shoot when the foot's down? Should I be timing that? That's not my preferred method. I know there are smart people out there that teach that, but that's not the way I like to do it. I like to get people to move the gun so smoothly that they can shoot pretty much whenever they want. Because I don't want you thinking about your feet. Because we don't shoot very well when we're thinking about our feet. Why would we? And that means we can't do that in competition. Now, one-handed shooting, what you need to do there is estimate the percentage of the shooting in your sport that's one-handed. So steel challenge, if that's all you do, you don't really need to practice shooting one-handed, because there's no one-handed shooting in steel challenge. That's fine. If that's all you care about, don't need to do it. USPSA is very interesting because the percentage can change depending on the match. I remember nationals a couple years ago, it was darn near 20% of the match, 15 for sure. And then carry optics last year, I think it was only 2 stages. But if you're a contender to win your class or your division, those 2 stages could cost you the match, especially if you really screw the pooch on them. So it's not up to me to determine. IDPA is another good example. Maybe in IDPA it's just a 5x5 classifier, but I do know IDPA has one-handed shooting in it, and I do know that people that win those stages are more likely to win the match. Right? The one-handed stages are the easiest ones to begin to win, especially locally. So if you're wanting to upset the apple cart locally, you get really good at one-handed shooting. That's what I know. Those were the first stages that I won, because coming up Circleville, Ohio, ironically, it wasn't considered cool to practice. Those guys weren't practicing very much. But as soon as I shot my first one-handed stage and heard all the complaining, I thought, well, this is probably something I can get better at pretty easily. And I'm pretty sure the first stages I won were one-handed stages. That's a particular strength of mine. So, but estimate the percentage you think is required and spend that time training. This is probably the most important thing to look at when the match book comes out, is there one-handed shooting? Because if you get the match book a week early, that's still time to get better, or at least more confident in one-handed shooting. And if you're having trouble finding the dot one-handed because you're new to the dot, you don't have that kind of time. Like, you don't have 4 seconds to find that dot one-handed. That's an easy thing to dry fire without even putting on your rig. You pick up the gun and find the dot one-handed. And don't ever put it back in the holster or set it down without finding that dot. Don't ever do it, because there's something your hand and your head and your eyes and your body need to do to find that dot one-handed. Your job is to let your body figure that out and have that be the only way. Okay? So, creating a training program is really about knowing who you are as a shooter. What do I need to get better at to reach my goals? And yes, you may need to get better at all of these things. But it's very easy to get more accurate if you're not worried about time. And it's very easy to get faster if you're not too worried about accuracy. And then practicing match mode is the best way to look at the blend of those two. We do a really cool thing at the end of shot calling in the classes, where people learn and are sometimes surprised that shot calling, they know shot calling has made them more accurate, but they're surprised by the fact that it's also hasn't really made them faster, but it's allowed them to shoot quicker. Let's just put it that way. So if you want to shoot quicker, learn to call your shots. And any kind of live fire training for practical shooting, learning to call your shots, I am still convinced and will always be convinced that learning to call the shot is the most important skill that you can have. It tells you how fast to shoot. It gives you acceptable accuracy without slowing down. It cuts your makeup shots in half. It frees you from having to look at the target to check your work. You don't have time for that. I did a study once where I realized that at a 5 hit factor, you don't have time to see a Charlie on your target, like literally see the bullet hole, make it up, and have it help your hit factor. You don't have time. You're better off taking the Charlie if you have to look on the target. Now, if you can see it when the gun goes off, and, well, I can do the math right now. Okay. Charlie and minor is 2 points down, 5 hit factor. You've got 0.4 of a second to prevent or correct that Charlie before it hurts your hit factor. And ironically, 0.4 is about where called makeups begin. Meaning, a makeup shot under 0.4 very likely to be called. a makeup shot over 4/10 is very likely to be observed, either on a dirt makeup or because we didn't see a bullet hole or we saw it hitting a no shoot or something like that. Called makeups are much, much faster than uncalled makeups, and that's the other power of shot calling. So I have a method for teaching that works extremely well, and I'd love to show it to you. And if you're interested in a more comprehensive training program, just go to andersonshooting.com, check out upcoming classes. Or if you have a particular group, if you have a ladies group that you'd like me to address, if you have a junior group you'd like me to address, if you want to put together a class for new or newer shooters, right? Somebody coming to see me when they're new, it would be the best time and money they could possibly spend getting started in the sport. So if you're a match director and you're getting new shooters, let's do a class. If you're in a female shooting group and you guys want to get into competition, let's do a class. Right? So Steve@andersonshooting.com is how you can make that happen. And until we meet again on the range, online, on the phone, on the Zoom, or anywhere else, be like me, do what I do, say it with me. 1, 2, 3, get to work.